Welcome to the 2020 annual meeting of the National Forum for Heart Disease and Stroke Prevention. This meeting marks the 10th anniversary of the National Forum as an independent organization, and it comes as more organizations, companies, agencies, and elected officials are engaging with the National Forum, collaborating to improve cardiometabolic health in every corner of the United States. We have things to celebrate. Our member and friend, Mark Fendrick from the VBID Center at the University of Michigan, co-authored a recent Health Affairs article that reported that life expectancy in the U.S. increased 3.3 years between 1990 and 2015. 44% of this improved life expectancy was attributable to public health, with 33% attributable to pharmaceuticals, and 13% attributable to other medical care. But, of course, something else has our attention in 2020. It has become routine for commentators to say that this is an extraordinary year, or that we are living in unprecedented times. However, in salient ways, 2020 bears tragic similarities to other years. It has unmasked inequities in health and the upstream determinants of health. These gaps have been there for decades, and COVID-19 has made them worse. Soon after the public health response to COVID-19 began to affect our everyday lives, we've heard voices from all across the country express the desire to return to normal. One thing on which I think every American can agree is that we want to be able to go to school, shop, socialize, attend events, and live our lives without fear of catching a deadly virus. But the old normal should not be our goal. Instead, we should plan and act now to set the U.S. on course to a new normal, one in which preventing cardiometabolic disease is a top priority. A normal in which inequities in health and other aspects of life are not accepted. A normal in which public health, healthcare, business, and civic entities work together to reduce the burden of preventable disease and to achieve health equity. That new normal will make the America that rises from the pandemic a stronger, more resilient nation. We, all of us in this virtual gathering today, must recognize that our efforts to build support for prevention and public health have not led to the level of support needed to make it a top priority in the old normal. One of the silver linings in the COVID cloud is the widespread recognition that cardiometabolic disease and risk factors afflict millions of people in communities and states across our country with unacceptable disparities, and that this has profound impact on the well-being of not only individuals and families, but the communities, regions, and society in which we live. We can and must leverage this moment to translate that recognition into broad and deep public support for cardiometabolic health and health equity. Today, we are going to have 4 discussions with a diverse array of thought and change leaders to prepare us to leverage this moment and make a compelling case for public and political support for the cause to which all of us have devoted our professional lives. First, our chair, Kim Stitzel, will talk with the National Forum's Chief Scientific Advisor, Dr. Steve Sidney, about his new signature report that includes action steps to blunt the impact of COVID-19 and improve cardiometabolic health in the short and long term. Then we will have panels on cardiovascular health as a societal imperative and an economic imperative, plus one on a new imperative, diagnosing and treating mental illness, which is strongly linked to cardiovascular disease. In between the first 2 panels, I will sit down for a conversation with the Surgeon General of the United States, Dr. Jerome Adams, to get his insights and hear more about his new call to action. The National Forum Awards and election of directors will follow the panels. It's important that voting members of the National Forum be present to vote in the election. It'll be good practice for November 3rd. We have a superb lineup of panel members today, In fact, I have a confession. We've brought together so many rock stars in their sectors and fields at this meeting that I'm worried about how we will meet this high standard next year. But that's a worry for later. For now, let's move ahead with our agenda. To begin, I will pass the baton to Kim Stitzel, Chair of the National Forum Board of Directors. Biographical sketches for all of today's speakers are in the virtual program book. They are impressive, and I commend them to you. Now, here's Kim to talk with Dr. Sidney about the new National Forum Signature Report.
Well, thank you, John. I couldn't be more excited for our conversation today with Dr. Steve Sidney. He is a senior research scientist and director of research clinics at Kaiser Permanente, Northern California, where he has conducted research studies since 1983, authoring over 400 articles in peer-reviewed journals. He received his BA from Yale University, his MD from Stanford School of Medicine, and his MPH in epidemiology from the UC Berkeley School of Public Health. He is a board certified in internal medicine and a fellow of the American Heart Association Council on Epidemiology, and he is our forum's chief science advisor. For the last 4 years, we've had this honor and privilege to have Dr. Steve Sidney prepare a signature report highlighting the trends and opportunities for improving heart health. This year, the signature report, what we have fondly labeled as the Sidney Report, examines trends in heart disease and stroke in the context of COVID and the inequities that are present in our society today. This report will be found on our homepage. So let's get started talking with you, Dr. Steve Sidney. Persons with pre-existing heart disease and cardiovascular risk, we know that they are strongly associated with severe illness from COVID-19. As you were analyzing the morbidity and the hospitalization data and trends, which populations or groups were you seeing that are disproportionately affected, and what are some of those immediate consequences of those inequities?
Well, first of all, we should say that cardiovascular disease and heart disorders are major risk factors for COVID-19. They include things like heart failure, coronary disease, cardiomyopathies, diabetes, and hypertension. And there are known disparities on these. And to give an example of how strong these factors are, hypertension and obesity are found in about half the people who are hospitalized with COVID-19. Excuse me while I clear my throat here. Now, minority populations have a particular problem with COVID. The case rates in minority race ethnic minority groups are 2.5 times those in non-Hispanic whites, and hospitalization rates are 4.5 times those of non-Hispanic whites. And notably, Blacks, African Americans have twice the risk of mortality from COVID than non-Hispanic whites. I want to focus on on hypertension actually for a moment here, because we've had some really bad news about hypertension in the past 5-6 years, where the control rates were recently reported to have dropped from 53% in 2013 and 2014 to 43% 2017 and 2018. That is a huge 10% drop. And it impacts here because the control rates are also very disparate, so that non-Hispanic whites have about a 48% control rate, while all of the major race ethnic minority groups are around 41%. So control is worse. And there are other disparities, very notable, that people who don't have medical insurance have half the rate of control of people who do, and about the same can be said for people who don't have regular medical care facility. So these disparities impact both cardiovascular disease, and they have, because cardiovascular risk impacts COVID, they impact COVID. So we really need to pay attention to them. And I'd say most notably these days with hypertension, though there are many of these risk factors that are a problem.
Steve, and I know that as a cardiovascular sort of society, we've been very, frustrated about our abilities to address inequities, as well as these trends going in the opposite direction we'd like to see. I bet there's a lot of cost involved. So not only is there the human capital, but what is the monetary capital that this brings forward as well?
Well, let's just say overall, the American Heart Association reports that cardiovascular disease costs the United States about $351 billion a year, hypertension about $56 billion a year. But these things get localized. They carry into the state level, they carry into the community level. We know that hypertension increases Medicaid expenditures by over $300 per beneficiary. And it's estimated that even in the younger age group, age 18 to 64, between 17 and 27% of people of Medicaid beneficiaries have hypertension. If you translate it into cost for a state, for example, Ohio has 3 million Medicaid beneficiaries. If 20% had hypertension, this would cost over $187 million to the state of Ohio. In particular, we can also find a cost within given communities. A recent report shows that metropolitan Buffalo has over $200 million increased cost because of hypertension, and metropolitan Nashville about $350 million. And finally, cardiovascular disease costs employers. The average person with cardiovascular disease loses 7 days a week of work because of their disease, and the insurance costs are more than $1,100 per employee on the average. So these extra costs spread out everywhere within society, everywhere within our country.
This is really tricky, particularly since we know the states were already burdened with costs from heart disease, and with the COVID reduced consumer spending, we are seeing then less money that will go into taxes to be able to support these programs.
Absolutely.
And so when we think about trying to get back to normal, I'd say it looks like from both an economic and a health perspective, we need to do better than we were before. What do we need to do right now in order to achieve a better state?
Well, as I was thinking of this and putting the report together, I thought there's some things. This is really a awful special year with the pandemic, and hopefully a year from now we'll be clear of this, but who knows? But in thinking about what needs to be done right now to protect people from cardiovascular disease and to protect them from COVID, the things that come to mind are flu vaccination, extremely important. Flu is an important cause of heart disease, and it's a particular problem with people with existing cardiovascular disease. So everybody should get a flu shot, high priority. Another thing we can do is to treat hypertension aggressively. And I bring this up because we know hypertension causes increased risk of COVID, not to mention a number of cardiovascular diseases. And we know that controlling hypertension will decrease the risk of the cardiovascular diseases. We don't know that it'll decrease the risk of COVID, but why not act as if it would, and act aggressively right now to bring down people's blood pressure, to control hypertension. And there's a reasonably quick method that will work in many, certainly not all people, is that if they have medical care, their blood pressure is controlled. A majority of people can be controlled using an algorithmic approach to hypertension treatment in a reasonably short period of time. So let's work on this. Now, obviously, anybody who's got cardiovascular disease emphasizes this is a particularly important time to take their medications. And the other thing that we've been thinking at the National Forum here is we may be pretty close to allowing pharmacists to do these tailored types of interventions that are algorithmic types of interventions. And this would really expand the group of providers and would help get things like hypertension, diabetes under control.
That's great, Steve. As we just wrap up this final, I have just one last question for you is, what do you think the final key message of this report is as we head into the meeting today?
Well, we really have to think about life during COVID and post-COVID. And I think our priorities as a country, certainly in the aims of the National Forum, are to keep moving forward to push people towards better cardiovascular health, to control hypertension, control other risk factors, to promote adherence to the healthy lifestyles, Life's Simple 7, make it easier for people to make healthy choices. And again, I get back to the Surgeon General just last week did a call to action to control hypertension, and well, let's do it. Let's just keep on our usual path, but be particularly aggressive now on taking care of certain things during the COVID pandemic.
Thank you, Steve. That sounds like a great charge as we head into our day today. Thank you so much for your time today, and we look forward to our future speakers.
Thank you very much.